Hello, everyone. My name is Cindy Absoon. I am a training outreach coordinator for Oregon State University. I work alongside the LC team. I am in work with the inclusion support team. Today, we are going to be talking about uh, the OECI Community Team webinar, Tools for Inclusion. This is based off the second chapter of the Inclusion Toolbox. Uh, it is awareness and commitment. This training is being briefly recorded um, so that members of our communities that are working in the state of Oregon are able to look back at this series and be able to have in-depth conversations while they start their community inclusion teams uh, around their state. The following slide is for our live Zoom language and interpretation, as we are currently attempting to provide this training with some live interpretation in Spanish for anyone that may be interested in joining. You are welcome to continue registering for the webinar series. Please reach out to lc-inclusion@oregonstateuniversity.edu to be able to find more information on how to register. Before we begin, I want to be able to first acknowledge that we all are having all this learning occur in Indigenous lands, and therefore our organization is committed to being helpful, respectful guest of this land and have made a commitment to Indigenous communities located here in Oregon. I ask that you also join me and commit to remembering we will take a moment at each every early learning training opportunity to remind ourselves that our participants are on Indigenous land, and we also want to remember that we have responsibilities to the Indigenous communities here in Oregon. I also want to acknowledge that we are committed to ourselves to continuously learn about the 9 federal recognized tribes in Oregon. And also, we are committed to action in support of the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon according to their request of us. On the screen, you will see a QR code, and the QR code can send you to a document that includes some resources and supports based on these commitments. This is a living document. It constantly is updated. There's also new resources as they become available. If you do not have access to a smartphone, the document is made available through a link, and I can share that link at the bottom of this video, depending on whatever platform you're watching. You can also find information on what current native land you are currently residing on using this other QR code at the bottom to find out what native land you are on. Before we begin, as this is our second session for this webinar series, I want to be able to ask participants to be able to have a small icebreaker. I want to continue having you all introduce one another and be able to choose an object that's within reach and be able to present it in camera so that we are all able to know a little bit more about you. And this could be something simple like I have my lunch in front of me, or I have a picture of my family that we took for a vacation that was very important for us. We want to be able to set a space for success, and we also want to make sure that you are um, aware of the learning agreements that help us all as learners best participate in a space where we feel safe, accepted, and included. We want to ensure that our We're in a soft space for all, that we do not tolerate any impact of other that we do not tolerate behaviors that impact the safety of others. Therefore, any harmful statements regarding race, ethnicity, ability, sexual orientation, gender, religious backgrounds, lived experiences, and or other identity markers, statements that lean into stereotypes, disrespect towards others' viewpoints will not be tolerated. We want to be sure that we create a space that is welcoming and inclusive, where all people are valued for their identities, including their gender, race, ethnicity, sexuality, religion, abilities, and lived experiences. So please have a shared space where you can all feel safe to have these discussions. You can pause the video so that you are able to have these discussions in your group. Before we begin, I would like to be sure that we are aware as to the overview of this webinar. Monthly, we will be meeting with community inclusion teams, and we'll use the preschool inclusion toolbox to help plan and align towards community inclusion-based practices using an inclusion plan. And we'll also monthly have a little bit of lecture. We'll try to embed large group and small group activities on high quality inclusion using an assessment and resource. We will also begin to develop an action plan based on 2 to 4 priorities for initial self-assessment and upload those to your sites. Your sites can be Google Drive, SharePoint, whatever platform that allows all of your community member partners that are in your community inclusion teams can have access to. In our preschool inclusion toolbox, there is this quote that resonated with us, is to think creatively when planning preschool inclusion. This is on page 56. And we want to be sure that everyone, while we are sitting together and trying to practice inclusion, preschool inclusion in our communities, we want to be sure that we are all thinking creatively, whether it be inside, outside, around the box, upside down the box, in any best way possible that works for your community. Also, before we begin, I want to go over some of the key values that we will be discussing in our objectives today. For the second session, we're going to be examining some of the challenges and solutions when it comes to full inclusion opportunities for young children and their families. We also want to have a brief opportunity for you all to look at survey information based on your local attitudes and beliefs that challenge inclusion. We want to develop small solutions and strategies to help address these attitudes and beliefs, and then also build action items to help improve that attitudes and belief about inclusion. So our agenda today, what we will go over throughout this webinar is we're going to review a little bit of what we talked about last week. Hopefully, you all will have the opportunity to report to one another or have these items be completed from the first session. But if you don't, you can always pause and complete the action items before moving forward with this webinar series or this video. Next, you'll have the opportunity to report out the information that you are able to share from your action planning. We'll talk about barriers and supports for early childhood inclusion. We'll have 2 very unique activities that will allow you all to be able to add information continuously throughout the school year, and also provide you a resource for you all to be able to go back to whenever you need it and have it be made available to the public. And then we're going to do some action planning. We'll do some action planning based on our last week's indicator, C3, which is awareness and commitment. And this is where this chapter is going to focus on attitudes and beliefs and possible solutions. Therefore, we're going to be talking about how to action plan, come up with a consensus score if you have not done so, and then begin to create goals based on those consensus scores. So before we begin, I want to go over what we talked about last time that we met. We discussed some progress, updates, and barriers, and some questions may have risen up while you were having these discussions. Um, if you were not able to find the current rate of the children with IFSPs that are receiving services in the regular classroom, please try to look for the information on the ODE website, the Oregon Department of Education. They have this information publicly available for communities to be able to find that information. And I hope you were all able to set a goal for the next 3 years to increase the percentage of children with IFSPs that are receiving their special education and related services embedded in a regular setting. I hope you all also were able to determine how you are going to create and share this information of high quality inclusion so that that way you are all able to create an awareness and a commitment to preschool inclusion. I also hope you were all able to develop an action item that goes along with this indicator for the community inclusion team, C1, which is leadership. Um, I hope you were able to come up with at least 2 to 4 top priorities from the initial self-assessment and be able to upload those onto your spreadsheet or on PIDS, the Pyramid Model Implementation Data System. You are welcome to pause the video here to reflect on the progress of your actions from the first session and then note any barriers or updates that you may all have. As we move forward, I want you all to be able to reflect on your previous session action plans regarding preschool inclusion. Therefore, within your small groups, if you can all share on what you were able to determine for membership, who should be at the table. If you were able to share also your vision statement and target, and also your consensus score for your first indicator, C1, the leadership team. So now we're going to move forward into the reflective activity based on the indicator C3, awareness and commitment from the inclusion toolbox. And this is about spreading awareness and ensuring that shared interest parties are informed and committed to the goals of inclusion. It involves developing public campaigns, engaging community feedback, highlighting successes about it and examples of inclusion, and continuously evaluating the effectiveness of these efforts, all with a focus on equitable access to information and resources. So if you can all take a moment and look at the key points from the indicator, it focuses mostly on fostering inclusion awareness through feedback, public awareness initiatives, and engaging with community-specific programs. If you're interested in finding this specific information, you can visit the ectacenter.org website, and you can find the community indicators there. If you'd like, you could pause this video and be able to have some opportunity to reflect on these questions. Which of the actions from the indicator could help raise awareness about inclusion in your community? What barriers might you encounter when trying to promote inclusion awareness, and how can you overcome them? How can public awareness initiatives be tailored to meet the unique cultural and language needs of your community. Please pause the video and be able to answer these questions together within your teams. After you have paused this video, I hope you guys were all able to consider some key ideas when it comes to looking at this indicator and gathering an action plan. Here are some key ideas to consider when you're thinking about this indicator. Be sure that you are gathering feedback from families, providers, and community members on inclusion. You also want to help implement a public awareness campaign using research-based benefits of inclusion, and you can find most of that information on your preschool and inclusion toolbox and other IDEA websites. Also, you can also try to find information on the Oregon Department of Education and also at our website in Oregon State University with the LC team. You can find our information on the Inclusion Initiative. You also want to make sure that you're tailoring campaigns based on different audiences, including families and policymakers. So we don't want to use high academic verbiage here. We want to make sure that we keep this free from jargons, but at the same time, give enough information so that everyone that is reading that information and campaign is tailored so that families and policymakers can understand. We also want to highlight successful inclusion programs as demonstration sites. Um, we consider demonstration sites usually your model sites, your sites that will help you advocate for a successful inclusion. And this can all look different in every program. A demonstration site does not have to perfectly have everything aligned, but it does help other providers, teachers, educators, administrators be able to see how a successful inclusion program functions. We also want to develop a presentation in order for us to recruit more local programs or family childcare home providers to join in inclusion practices, and therefore the presentations will help you with recruitment. So while we have clear evidence of the benefits of inclusion, we must ask ourselves why progress has been so limited over such a long time. This slow progress challenges us to think critically about how we can accelerate inclusion efforts in our communities and make lasting, meaningful changes. When we look at the research that was conducted in 1987 and then a follow-up research that occurred in 2014, you'll see that there was a slight increase, but it's only been 5.7% in the last 27 years. So if you can take a few moments to pause this video and reflect, what progress, if any, has your program made towards increasing inclusion? And what has helped or hindered that progress? So when we look through the challenges outlined, the national survey that was conducted, you could view this information on page 46, where you can find and read box 2.1, which is the survey responded information. These are the questions that, a brief overview of the questions that were being asked. In figure 2.2, you'll see the reported numbers of individuals that identify each challenge and solutions. This survey received from more than 200 people from 33 states and Guam. The majority of the people that responded to the survey were from school districts, special education directors, preschool special education, child care coordinators, school district early childhood administrators, state preschool. Other respondents also included school psychologists and Head Start administrators. I want to encourage you all to think about the attitudes and beliefs you currently have about preschool inclusion and what those challenges and barriers may be so that we can move forward to the next slide where you can take this QR code or we'll provide the link at the bottom of this video to be able for you to respond to the survey that was conducted as a follow-up when this was conducted nationwide. I would like you all to take the opportunity to select and indicate the extent to which you feel each item represents a barrier in your early childhood inclusion. And this is all based on your own experiences and or beliefs. Your responses are anonymous. No one will know who is responding and which program you're from, what organization you're from. But if you can go ahead and select either between definitely not a barrier, if you have not worked in a preschool inclusion or are unaware of how to answer based on your own experience barriers to inclusion, then you can select not sure. And then you'll have also an option to select definitely a barrier. Please utilize this poll to rate how significant you find these challenges, and then afterwards, you'll be able to view a summary link to these responses. This QR code will continue to be live until the end of the school year so that we can go ahead and generate enough aggregated data as to the climate on barriers for preschool inclusion for the state of Oregon. Here is the summary link. The QR code that you see here will help send you to the summary responses. Again, the document is intended for you all to be able to review and be able to see what sort of trends do you see when it comes to preschool inclusion challenges and barriers. So the following things that we see here were from represent in the survey from the median of challenges respondents identified to be seen throughout the years of the survey when it was administered even in 2014. Very little has changed. The number one thing that challenged was attitudes and belief. Many respondents indicated that there is a persistent fear that includes children with special needs would negatively impact typically developing children. There is also a concern about staff preparedness and general awareness of the inclusion benefits. There's also a belief that plays a huge role and part in shaping of inclusion practices, and it's about internally reflecting on how these attitudes may be present in our own communities. And that is why I asked everyone to complete the survey so that we are aware as to our own beliefs and why we may have them and provide you an opportunity to reflect. Another significant challenge or area of concern was policies and procedures. Some respondents mentioned inconsistent application of standards across different agencies. Other highlighted that there's a lack of flexible funding guidelines to support inclusion, and we hear that a lot throughout our communities. As a community, you can help to develop these inclusion teams and start rising this topic of conversation. And you all need to think about how local or state policies might impact your inclusion efforts and what changes could be made to address them. A significant challenge that we see was the lack of resources. And this also includes enough high quality childcare programs, insufficient trainings for regular teachers and specialists, and then the lack of materials such as assisted technology or specialized services. These are all very costly. But we want to consider the resource limitations in your environment and then discuss how these affect the ability to provide inclusive education. Therefore, this is why we open a Padlet. This Padlet and the QR code here, the link will be provided at the bottom of this video. We'll give you all an opportunity to go through each of the barriers and identify and be able to, we encourage you to brainstorm of what specific items or challenges you may currently have in your community. Please feel free to pause this, take a few moments to complete the Padlet or read the other information that others have shared on Padlet. So after we've reviewed and identified challenges, we notice that these stem from attitudes and belief, which are powerful, but can be changed with the right strategies. The challenges we observe when it comes to attitudes are rooted in misconceptions about resources and support. These stem from effective, consistent communication and collaboration between all community partners. This is all playing in the same sandbox and being able to talk to one another and share. When this is lacking, inclusion efforts become impacted through the guarding of information and support. For communities to continue striving and to have effective, high quality inclusion, there needs to be a shared effort between all parties to share and be part of these inclusion conversations. This is why looking over at the community leadership team indicator 1 was beneficial for your team to start to determine who needs to have a seat at this table. Another common challenge is staff feeling unprepared or lacking the necessary training. I, for one, have had this experience when I first started in Head Start, where we often get pushed to the deep end and you either sink or swim. And when children in our classroom entered with the IFSP and disability, we were unable to provide them the proper high quality support that I would have preferred as an educator. I had very limited training in special education, and it wasn't until later that I ended up being able to find support, either looking for information online or talking to other teachers and facilitators on what best practices to help. This was all before coaching was mandatory in Head Start programs. We can surpass these challenges by being able to offer opportunities for professional development. Some professionals and families also lack awareness and understanding of what inclusion practices are. So we want to include the benefits of children with and without disabilities. There's also turf issues where professionals often do not share while in the sandbox, where we see conflicts arise because of different teams or professional roles and responsibilities. These can hinder collaboration efforts. I want to finally also discuss about the lack of mutual respect between team members. Often these are stemming from stress, burnout, communication, etc. But it can also create a difficult environment for inclusion to thrive. So if you could take a few moments and reflect, which of these challenges resonate most with your experience? How do you think they can be addressed in your community? Feel free to pause this video if you need to so that you can have a further discussion. I would like for you all to also, before we move towards solutions and supports, to think about which specific beliefs or attitudes has had the most significant impact on your inclusion efforts. These could be inclusion efforts that are currently occurring in your community, or these could also be significant impacts that you have experienced in your own lived experiences. Here is another survey for you all to take. This is a QR code to the Supports to Early Childhood Inclusion. This is the same survey that was still with the items that were developed from the authors that reviewed the literature on early childhood inclusion. We would like you all to be able to answer the survey or poll and be able to indicate to the extent of which you feel each item represents a barrier to early childhood inclusion. Well, this one will be focused more on supports. You want to also answer these based on your own experience and or beliefs. You'll be able to select either definitely not a support as an option, 3 as not sure, and 5 is definitely a support. We'll have the form or the link to this QR code if you are unable to have access to it and would like to access it on your web browser. It would also be added to the bottom of this video. After you have all been able and had the opportunity to add to that survey, here is the summary link to the responses. This web link will also be added to this video description in order for you all to be able to visit and see the ever-evolving information that's being shared and see trends when it comes to what attitudes and beliefs or supports that your community finds helpful. So please take the time to visit this summary link and have a discussion as to what resonates with you the most. As we move along to solutions to attitudes and belief challenges, I want to be able to see that there are two overarching categories when it comes to solutions. The first one is collaborative strategies. We see a significant change when we have collaboration between different systems and cross sectors. There is also awareness support for building strategies. And the awareness and support really helps you all be able to share information and even professional development with one another. There's also other solutions that require us to oftentimes make system changes. And therefore, talking to our state leadership team will help us find what barriers our communities currently have. It's also best for us to determine where efforts might be the most effective in changing systems or state policies and procedures. While we talk about solutions, here is another Padlet for you all to be able to add your and create a brainstorm and another resource for you all to visit. This is for you all to start having a place to write your solutions based on the attitudes and beliefs others may have or discussions that have occurred in the preschool inclusion toolbox. After you have seen the Padlet, I would like you all to be able to reflect on how can you implement this solution in your program and what steps can you take to overcome resistance or barriers. As we move forward, please take out your action planning templates or your forms if you have a printout or wherever you're storing it in your storage platforms, whether it be Google Drive or SharePoint, etc. You want to be able to look over this information and have the opportunity to answer and score in the consensus with using the community inclusion indicators and then filling out your action planning template. You can go ahead and discuss a little bit more on how we can ensure high quality inclusion opportunities. And then you can also select either one or 4 actionable steps that can help you implement it in the next month. So you can pause this video and start action planning for C3 indicator awareness and commitment. If you can please have the opportunity as well, after you have watched this video, to fill out the evaluation for this recorded video. Any feedback that we receive is highly encouraged and is also beneficial so that we are able to create this training and make it more accessible and available to those around in our communities. Our intent is to be able to help provide information that's valuable to you and to your team. For our next webinar series, though, we'll focus on evidence-based practices for successful inclusion. We will be skipping the month of November and be moving over, come back together again on December 11th, 2024. So please look at your syllabus so you can see the reading information that we would like you all to complete before we come back in December. We hope to see you all at the Northwest Summit in November 12th through the 14th. I also wanted to bring you all to a time for you all to be able to reflect. Those Padlets that I added came from these 2 forms. These forms are available in your preschool inclusion toolbox. Forms 2.1, the perception of attitudes and belief challenges. And then also form 2.2, a menu of preschool inclusion attitudes and solutions. You can also take the printout and be able to fill out this information on your own with your team. Here are your next steps for continuing this work on the preschool inclusion toolbox and the community inclusion indicators. With your program coaches, please take the time to be able to look at the local indicators. Those are again available on the ectacenter.org website. And then also take a few moments to look at the early care and education environment indicators. Please take a few moments to also, within the next month, to be able to read Chapter 5, which is in page 113 through 129. Please continue reviewing and reading the community indicators and elements, and in our next time that we meet, we'll be talking about curriculum. I want to thank you all for being able to sit here and listen to me talk the whole time, but also be able to engage in this in-depth conversation for your community inclusion teams. If you're interested in signing up into our core mailing list, please do so by scanning this QR code. You're also more than welcome to sign up for the LC newsletter where we send out information as to training or what we're currently up to. This is my contact information, and this is my colleague's contact information, Chad Lar. This entire project was funded by the Oregon Department of Education through intergovernmental agreements. So please see our grantee information at the bottom. Here are some of the resources that we used today, but there will be likely more resources available at the bottom in the description of this video. Thank you so much for staying.